Y'all planning for this?
Welcome back, TPR Nation. This is Jamie Shilanski in an episode of Worlds to Conquer, and today we are going to have a bluntly honest conversation about nepo babies. So if you have not heard of that term before, it is referring to nepotism in the workplace and the corporate structure. So nepo baby, of course, just like any other term for nepotism, is somebody that is handed a job or a promotion or has certain sense of entitlement based on their parents' achievements or their family history. So one thing in my family, in our household, was I raised my son and my niece and nephew, and we always talked about ugly, honest truths. And in this family, I'm triggered by lying. It will enrage me and I must destroy you if you lie to me. If you tell me an ugly, honest truth, okay, fine. We can work through that. That's not a problem. But if you're trying to be malicious and deceitful and you're lying to me, I will light your world up. It just absolutely triggers me. So in our household, we talked about that a lot, especially because kids tell a lot of little lies that accumulate into big problems later. And it is the act of lying that becomes the problem. It is the tendency to take the easy way out instead of being accountable for your actions that really bothers me. Because if you had told me the whole story from the beginning, which by the way, I'm going to find out anyways, then I could have helped you from the get-go and I could have taught you the lessons that you needed to learn and do those things. So in our house, we call it the ugly, honest truths, is that we might not like it. We might not want to hear it. It might be really hurtful or disturbing, but we're going to tell the ugly, honest truths. And so in this podcast, we're going to talk about the ugly, honest truths. And if you are out there in the financial advisory space and you are one of two camps, either you are a parent who is trying to create a legacy firm and leave it to your children. You want the kids to come up and take over the business. Maybe they already started in the business and they're working in some type of junior capacity. Or if you are that person that's in that junior seat, Floyd Shilanski, my father, him and my mom started our Shilanski and Associates, our RA, up in Anchorage, Alaska in 1981. And him and I did a recorded session together. You'll have to go back. We'll link the episode in the show notes. But it's really powerful episode to listen to from the perspective of one being the heir apparent and the second being the grantor of that estate, of that legacy. And so hearing Floyd's perspective, hearing my perspective on that is really, I thought it was a powerful conversation between both of us and a dialogue that happened several years ago between us where, we were in our young 20s. We used to have to do Toastmasters. So that was a public speaking. I don't know if it's still around. I hope it is because it was so good. And you draw a topic out of a hat pretty much. And then you'd have to go around, you practice public speaking. You'd have to give a speech to, in our group, there was like 12 to 20 of us. And one of the things that really bothered my dad was that my brother would never say, I'm from a family firm. He would never say, my parents started the company or all of these different things, giving credit to my mom and dad. And so he was talking to me about it one day and he's like, your brother just keeps mentioning himself. He doesn't mention the family. He doesn't mention that, mom and I started this company, that we brought him in, blah, blah, blah. And I said, Dad, that's because you don't understand what it means to be the son or daughter of the boss. And he's like, what do you mean? It means that you guys were given all these opportunities. You're shown how to work hard, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, Dad. Whenever somebody hears that you and mom started the company, all they ever say is, oh, you work for your parents. And that is code for you couldn't go get a real job somewhere else. And my dad thought this was absolute bogus. He was like, you're so sensitive. I can't believe you'd be even mentioning this, something I've never been accused of being. But as we kind of went through things together, I said, Dad, here I am now, and as time progressed, even in my 30s, I said, your adult friends feel this same way. They will introduce me and they say, oh, Jamie works for her dad. Oh, Jamie works for her mom, these kind of things. And so they don't see what I do or how I do it or that I am doing the job. They see it as something that was handed to me. And he was really taken aback by that until one time it happened in front of his friends. And I said, okay, Dad, did you just hear that? And he goes, and he shook his head and he's like, yeah, I just heard it. And that's the ugly, honest truth is that if you are the kid of an entrepreneur and you're growing up in that business, you have to outwork everybody. You must outwork everybody because every single person that you encounter, if it's a client, if it's an associate, if it's a center of influence, if it's a coworker, everyone is going to think that you got that job handed to you. They will never, ever look at your experience, your work ethic, your skills, your expertise, and think that you got this on your own merit. They will not believe that. It was handed to you, it was awarded to you, whatever that is. So this is one of the reasons that my baby brother, Micah Shilanski, and I are firm believers in the fact that you cannot outwork us. You cannot outwork us. You might be smarter, you might have more natural talent, but you will never show up and work harder than we do or want it more than we do. And that is because we grew up with everyone thinking that we were these nepo babies, that everything had been handed to us. And if you knew my parents, nothing was handed to us because nothing worth having ever should be. We had to work for everything. I remember one time my friend Sarah had stayed the night and we got up the next morning and it was, mid 80s. So we wanted to 1980s, not temperature. I still live in Alaska, but in the 1980s, we wanted to take our bikes and go to this store and buy stuff, but we didn't have any money. And so my dad said, hey, I've got a way for you guys to earn money. If you guys want to wash all the vehicles, I'll go ahead and pay you for that. My dad lined up four vehicles, his motorhome, his Dodge pickup truck, the minivan, and then my mom's LHS Chrysler. And we washed all four of those. He came out, he would see the streaks, made us wash them again. When we got done doing that, he handed us a $5 bill. A $5 bill. That's what he handed us. And it was funny because I was sharing this story with my neighbors had us over for Ethiopian night, and she's Ethiopian, and he is a good old farm boy from Texas. And I was talking about this story about, nothing in life ever, worth having is given to you. It's always earned. And he mentioned his story. He said, yeah, I was working in Oklahoma and somebody had a pecan farm and they needed all the raking done. And so I went out to this widow's house and she asked if she could hire me for the day. I said, absolutely, yes, ma'am. And I raked 3 acres of property for her. And when I got done, she handed me a $5 bill and a cold Pepsi. And one of our neighbors, he goes, and you were thankful for it, weren't you? And then him and John and I looked at each other. We're like, hell no, we were not thankful. But we taught us a lesson, the lesson with the car washing, the lesson with the pecan raking. And that is back-breaking work, by the way. But the lesson of that is that you negotiate the price up front. It taught us that lesson, that if the work is going to be done, you negotiate your price up front. And so those are the lessons that come along to us in life when things aren't handed to us. And I would not have traded my childhood for anything in the world. I think my parents did an amazing job of making us honest, hardworking, and kind people. We are fierce. We are goal setting. We have high energy. We're always looking to achieve more, but we are kind, honest, and very hardworking people. And when I look at my son, that's what I want for him too. I don't care if he goes out and makes millions of dollars. I don't care if he goes into finance. I don't care what he does for a profession, but I want him to be kind, honest, and hardworking. So I'm telling you how great my childhood was and how many lessons I learned from being, quote unquote, a nepo baby, but then also to avoid being a nepo baby entirely. And this, all of the reasons why that you'll be underrated, people will think that everything was handed to you and you won't be seen with the same level of respect. So how do you avoid that? And especially like as a parent and as a child of an entrepreneur. And I think that's an important thing to talk about because today, more than ever, especially in law, and especially in finance, and even in medicine, most children who are raised in households that practice one of those disciplines go into like or similar businesses as adults. They go to study medicine, they go to study law, they go to study finance, they go into very similar things. And that is because one of their exposure, and we think this is an aristocracy thing. We think that is just because that's being handed down from profession to profession. But if you did a study and you looked at general contractors and how many of their kids went into contracting or construction, the numbers are also pretty high. Why? Because we generally gravitate towards things that are known and comfortable, and we don't know what other paths lay out there. When my son, we put him on a fast track program. So when he graduated high school at 16 and university with his bachelor's degree at 20. And when we sat down, I had outlaid a 10-year plan for him. And I said, here's the goals. Here's when you're going to graduate high school. I didn't plan for him to graduate at 16. He was just really motivated to get out of high school and start his life in a different capacity. And he's very task oriented. So getting through his curriculum and punching all those classes out was something he wanted to do. He also wanted to do it during the summertime, not because he is super academically inclined, but because he wanted it done. He saw the work in front of him and he wanted to get it done. Just like with his college degree, same thing. He took summer classes so that he could graduate in 4 years instead of 5 or 7, and worked his way through school as well, because nothing in life worth having is handed to him. So we didn't pay for college. He had to work his way through. He had to use scholarships, and he had to take out a student loan in order to get his degree. So after he graduated, then upon successful graduation, because people often ask me about that, you didn't help him at all. Of course I helped him. We had meals all the time, and we also subsidized his living. So he had to pay rent when he was in the house, but it was subsidized, an all-inclusive house, right, for him during college. He was going to go to the dorms, but COVID kind of thwarted that for him. So he ended up staying home for all 4 years. And when he graduated successfully with a bachelor's degree, he was awarded $10,000. He used that to purchase his first real car and was able to pick up a job where he needed reliable transportation. So that's how we structured it. The reason that I don't believe in signing for student loans, we didn't do any parent loans. He had to do it for himself. Is because I can't find the advice I give clients is that you cannot finance your retirement, but you can finance college education. And if I'm going to give that advice to a client, I'm going to take it myself. If I'm going to make the meal, I'm also going to eat it. And if the advice we give clients is good enough for them, then it is good enough for us. So in my household, that's how we structured it. So he was pretty goal oriented. Now, when he graduated, he was only 20 years old with his bachelor's. And I sat down with him and I said, hey, we're going to develop a 5 and a 10-year plan. Here's all of the things that you're going to go accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years. And this plan is our best attempt to navigate you towards the right path. However, at any time, if you want to deviate from this plan or you come up with an alternate plan because this one doesn't suit you, that's totally fine. I'm 100% on board with that. What I am not on board with is you having no plan at all. You need to have some type of career path laid out. You need to have some type of milestones, because the travesty in our country is that we raise our kids and we're constantly telling them what to do. And then somewhere around age 16 is we're like, well, you're almost an adult. You're almost an adult. That doesn't mean to them because we haven't taught them what adulting means. I mean, you want a real reality. I mean, especially to the mamas out there, that mama bear instinct, you need to go watch that Japanese show called Old Enough. It's a reality show, and it will put your heart inside of your throat because you're so nervous during that whole thing. But in America, we really have sort of taken our little cubs, our baby cubs out there, and we've held them really, really close to us. I know people call this helicopter parenting, but it's we're not allowing them the opportunity to become adults. We're not allowing them the opportunity to navigate situations of working with other people because we're so gosh darn terrified of all of the bad things that could potentially happen. So when he turned of age and when he didn't have a plan and when he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, I said, no problem. This is the plan we're going to lay out for you. You can deviate from any time that you come up with a better plan. Now, this wasn't some type of contest. His plan didn't have to be superior to mine. It just had to be a plan. It had to be a plan where he could afford his lifestyle. He was putting money towards savings, and he was putting money towards retirement, and he was giving back to the world. He was contributing in some capacity. So as he went down this, and he's on year 6 of that plan, and he has not yet deviated from it. And it's not because he's lazy and doesn't want a different path. It's just that now all these doors are opening and he's like, oh, okay, I see what I do want and I don't want. So here's what he didn't get. What he did not get was a job at Shilanski and Associates when he turned of age. Here's the reason why. I did and Micah did, and we grew up in that business. And that was great. Like, we started as janitors, then we went to filing, then we went to cold calling, stuffing mailers. We used to use the guerrilla marketing system, and I have stuffed in one batch 40,000 mailers in over a weekend. You want to talk about a good time dating me in high school? It was, hey, do you want to come down to my office and help me stuff mail? Put on labels. And that was more than one date night I had at the office asking somebody to help me stuff envelopes because that was my job. That's what we had to get out when we were trying to fill successful money management seminars and financial strategies for successful retirement. So we worked from the ground up and we got to see all the inside and the mechanics of how things worked in the office. And starting off, I mean, we had 4 different responsibilities before we were even allowed to know how to pick up the phone and answer it at the office. And that was really good for us in our education. Now, here's why I didn't do it with my son, is because I was raised by my mom and dad, Floyd and Rosa. And as parents, they were so fun and they were always inviting. We never, ever guessed if we were loved. We never guessed if we felt safe. And they exposed us to a lot of things. They're always curious about learning and they're always willing to just be kids. They just play. They love to play and just do silly things. And I absolutely love that about them. But those parents are not the same grandparents to my kid. So my parents had a lot of discipline. We saw that leather belt more than one time. We did not backtalk. We did not step out of line. We did not curse. And we sure as heck didn't get ice cream for breakfast. There were rules that we lived by as children. Those rules disappeared in 1997 when my older sister gave birth to my very first niece, Jaslyn. And suddenly a light switch flipped and who my parents had been as parents is not who they are as grandparents. Those grandkids get away with damn near murder. And when my brother and I established rules on the premise of what they taught us growing up, you would think we're executioners the way they look at us. I mean, it's just absolute defense of the grandkids constantly. So the reason that I don't let the grandkids, the niece and nephews, come into the business is because of that dynamic, because they're not going to be treated the same way that we were treated, where we felt we had to earn every single inch that was given to us. What would happen instead is we would start invoking some type of discipline around running the company. And one of the kids would end up talking to the grandparents about it. The grandparents, Floyd and Rosa, who are still active in the company, would then have a meeting with us and tell us as CEOs what we need to be doing. There's a lot of family dynamic inside of there. So I came up with a hard rule. A hard rule was none of the kids were allowed to have their first job at Shilanski & Associates. Go work for somebody else because you've already been raised around entrepreneurs. You've already been raised as business owners. All the kids in our family, and regardless of what path they're on today, they approach every single job as if they own the company. They treat every company dollar as if it's their own money in their own checking account. They see every client interaction and experience as the vitality of being a business. You know, when you walk into a department store and the phones are ringing off the hook and the patron or the clerk looks super, super annoyed to be helping any patrons, like they look wickedly inconvenienced. That is not one of the Shilanski children that were raised. Not one of us. We are all immensely thankful because we understand how much effort it takes into marketing to get a client, to get somebody to come back to your store one time, yet alone 2 or 3 or repetitive times and spend their dollars on your services. So all of our kids were raised with that sort of mentality. They all have that mindset. But I didn't want them feeling that this was one, the only path that they had to take was to come into the company or come into finance. 2, they needed to go cut their teeth with somebody else because they were given a lot of those learning lessons that most young people don't get to start learning until they reach age 30. So by the time they were 16 and had jobs, because in our family, if you want a car, if you want a phone, you better get money to start paying for those things. So you go out and get your job. They already had light years of entrepreneurial lessons and business techniques underneath their belt that made them absolute rock stars in their employment. Everyone was just phenomenal reporting on all of the kids that raised in our family regarding their work ethic and regarding how much responsibility they take on without always asking for additional compensation. I mean, in today's workforce, that is just phenomenal. They're just excited to work. We love to work in this family. Now, they also needed to learn the negative aspects of working for somebody else. And prior to having your first job, your only mental relationship, your social relationship of working with other bosses that aren't your mom and dad are your teachers. And we did this with the kids we never were those type of parents that went in and met with the principal and switched teachers for the kids. Instead, we would say, you know what? In life, you're going to have bad bosses. You're going to have great bosses that you think about for the rest of your life, but you're going to have some really crappy bosses too. But the beautiful part about being in school is those bosses that are crappy only last 1 year or 1 semester. And you have to learn the endurance of how to navigate those relationships. We didn't let them hit the easy button. This was really difficult for me when my son was in 3rd grade. And he had a male teacher, Mr. Johnson. And the stories that Lane would come home and tell me, Mr. Johnson was just, he didn't like Lane because Lane was very charismatic. He got along with all of the teachers. I mean, he was just very charming as a little boy. And Mr. Johnson thought it was super annoying. You could absolutely tell he was annoyed by Lane. And so he just socially made Lane so uncomfortable and so stressed out. And we got through the end of the year and we didn't let Lane quit. We didn't let him go switch different classrooms, even though other kids, other boys' moms were doing that in that classroom. And this was just verbal discomfort. This wasn't anything inappropriate going on with this particular teacher, just verbal discomfort. And so we got to the end of the school year. And I remember one time pulling up and it was about Christmas. And I went and got Lane and I found this Mr. Johnson yelling at Lane out on the playground. And I was seething. I was absolutely seething. But I was like, okay, don't interfere. Don't interrupt. Let this experience happen because Lane's going to have to know that I can't shelter him for the rest of his life. So he got through that. Lane came over to me. I looked Mr. Johnson in the eye. He looked at me and began to apologize. And I said, nope. Not now. I don't want to hear it. And I walked away because it was taking everything I could. I mean, the tongue might weigh only a few ounces, but it is the heaviest thing in the world to hold. And so I had to hold my tongue and get out. Now, after that year wrapped up, after we got Lane's report card, you bet your sweet bottom, I went into that teacher's office and ripped him a new one for how he treated my son. And I wasn't the only parent doing that at that time. It ended up no longer being his employment later. Ran into him a couple years later in Costco. He ended up getting fired from that job because there were so many complaints about how he was treating the kids, just very, very gruff. But I didn't let Lane quit that because even though he was at such a tender age, such a vile age, and it was crappy for him to have to go through. And it was crappy as a parent to watch him go through that. But I needed to show him that those experiences don't last forever. But the lessons you get to derive from those experiences do get to last forever. You do get to take those with you. And so that taught him. And I said, sometime in life, you're going to have a really crappy boss. And when you have that crappy boss, there's nothing that you're going to be able to do to navigate around them, but you got to learn how to endure so that every single day you smile and look at them and you think to yourself, I'm going to take your job. I'm going to work so hard that I will outwork you. I will outperform you. I will do everything I can that you are no longer my boss and I am your boss instead. And that is the lesson that I wanted him to derive from that 3rd grade experience with Mr. Johnson. Fast forward, and at age 16, he's working at Extreme Fun Center, which is one of these arcade places, kind of like a Game & Buster, but not that brand. And he's got good bosses and he's got bad bosses. When he first started working, would it have been easier to have him work for Shilanski and Associates and do things for me, especially so I could get the write-off? Yep, sure would have been easier. But it also wouldn't have taught him the lessons he needed to learn about working in other environments. And so he got to navigate that. And then when we set out his career plan and his first jobs in finance, he wasn't allowed to come work for the companies. It was a hard no. He needed to go learn somewhere else. Same thing with my niece, Jaslyn. She wasn't allowed to come work for the company. She needed to go work for McDonald's. You know what I loved about her working for McDonald's when she was 16? Is she had gotten her nose pierced and we all hated it. We hated her nose piercing. I didn't mind so much as my mom did. And so I had to hear about it all the time. But we would tell her, say, hey, listen, I don't think you're going to be able to get a job that you want with that nose piercing. And she was like, ugh, rolls her eyes thinking that we're just ridiculous. Well, she sits down with her interview with McDonald's and they say, hey, we'd love to have you, but OSHA doesn't allow nose piercing. So if you're willing to remove that, and then as soon as she's looking at this lady, this manager interviewing her, she reaches up, takes out the nose ring and is like, gosh, I hate it when my family's right. There is power in hearing it from somebody else. We've already said all of these things to our kids in the family. It doesn't matter. When they're young, they're not dismissive, they're embracing, they're accepting. When they're older, especially for little boys that hit about age 12 and become monosyllabic, you think they're not listening at all, and you think you're not getting through. And then girls, oftentimes in our family, they want to fight with us. So they want to challenge you. They want to verbally fight. They're incredibly emotionally intelligent, and they're skilled at that sort of navigating. And so you're having this upwards battle that you think you're not getting through. But you'll know you're getting through when they start working for somebody else, and you get to start hearing from your centers of influence, from people that have gone in and seen them at their job, or from the kids coming home and telling you about their job, that you are making a difference. You are getting through to them. It is mattering what you're laying down. That foundation is getting built, and they cannot avoid it. And the beautiful part about this, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about bringing kids into your own practice, is that all of that foundation, that seed planting that you have done, it will come out. It doesn't matter. The kids can try to resist it all day long, but once that seed is planted and a little sunshine, a little rain shows up, it has to grow. It by nature, it has to grow. It has to break out. It has to become something. And that is what we experienced with our kids. We planted all the seeds. We laid the soil. We worked the earth, but it was somebody else to bring the sunshine, somebody else to bring the rain that allowed them to be able to develop into the successful human beings that they are now becoming. So that stranger in the uniform, planting those seeds, making sure that you're cultivating that, but don't cut their legs off. You have the responsibility as a parent, as a grandparent, as an aunt, an uncle, a center of influence, whoever you are in the children's lives around you that you are influencing, you have a responsibility to make sure that they can endure the days to come, because not everyone is going to be you. Not everyone is going to be you or be as good-natured or protective or want them to grow and to learn. You've got to let them know about uncomfortability. You have to let them feel uncomfortable every now and then and not rush in to fix it. You need to give them the coping mechanisms to know how to fix it, to know when they need to endure. And just like that silly story I told you about with Mr. Johnson, it taught Lane he wasn't allowed to push the easy button, that not everyone in life is somebody he's going to get along with. And that, guess what? It's also temporary. It doesn't last forever. But the way that you cope, the way that you deal with this does last forever. I was listening to this child psychologist, and she was saying that, and I think I might have shared this with you before because it's so great, and I think about it all of the time, is that when children throw tantrums, they need you to feel what they're feeling. They can't articulate, they can't verbalize, they can't rationalize, they just don't have the mental capacity and development to be able to do those things just yet. And so when they have strong emotions, they need you to feel that strong emotion. And that's one of the reasons, mom, watch me, watch me, is they have a strong emotion. They're feeling pleasure, they're feeling joy, they want us, they feel a sense of accomplishment. And so they're wanting you to participate and share in that. But the flip side of that coin is that when they're really upset, they need you to be as upset as they are. Now, sometimes I have seen parents, and this drives me freaking nuts. The child will be screaming, and so then the parent starts screaming. And you're not teaching your kid to cope. What you're doing is telling them that this behavior is acceptable at any age. What you need to do instead is to allow your kids to have big emotions, but shut them down and tell them how to cope. My niece Jaslyn, she was never allowed by her biological mom to have big emotions. They were always sort of taken away from her. And so with her daughter, my great niece, she wants her to have big emotions. And so she doesn't tell her, she doesn't try to cope or correct that. And that's one thing that I'm working with her on, is those big emotions and those feelings, they're not bad, but she needs to know the skill set to be able to deal with them. She needs to know that when she's feeling really frustrated or mad, that doesn't mean she's allowed to come into the room and make everybody else feel frustrated and mad too. One of these things as adults is that you'll see people, and we all have somebody in our life like this. If they are feeling something, we must feel it too. If they're having a bad day, we must have a bad day. If they're having a good day and we're upset, that's just sacrilegious. We cannot do that. They need us to feel how they're feeling. And that's because in my mind, they have not learned coping skills, that they're not responsible for other people's emotions. They're responsible for their own emotions. And being able to know how to navigate that is imperative to becoming a really responsible, high-achieving adult. And so when you're mad, when you're angry, people shouldn't be able to always see it. You shouldn't make people around you mad and angry as well. You should be able to be disciplined and in control of that. This is one of those ugly, honest conversations, right? That there are two sides to every blade. And when you're the entrepreneur, you want to create a business. You want to create a family business. You want to create a legacy in which your kids can come over and take over what you've done and show them that craft. And that is very human nature of us. Since we began policies in different civilizations, we have often wanted to impart in our children the knowledge, experience, or expertise to be able to survive moving forward. And that means teaching them the skill set that we have. But the other side of that blade is making sure that we're not just giving things to them. Nothing worth having in life is ever just given to you. You must earn, you must work for it. One of the things that we do as a family is that we make sure that we're always planting seeds. We're always bringing kids into the conversation. A lot of the kids here are board meetings. In fact, I just had one with a partner's kid and they were going to have the kid shuffle off and she's age 10. And I said, nope, she can sit here. Here's the rules of engagement. You can listen. You may not interrupt. You must be deadly silent. And then after this, you can ask us questions. We'll give you about 5 minutes of space. So write down all your questions that you have and we'll come back to them. Because I think it's good for kids to start mirroring and seeing and listening. That's all that planting seeds. But for me, in my experience, working for my mom and dad was great. We also had to go out and get other jobs as well. It wasn't just for mom and dad, mostly because we wanted to earn money and there wasn't a lot working for mom and dad. So, because their mentality was, you've already given you, a life and a house and food, and I pay for everything. Why would I pay you also for your labor? So in order to buy things, we had to go get other jobs for other people. We had to work 2 or 3 different places to be able to purchase and consume things as we got older. That's kind of a trait we still carry on to this day, is that we know that we have a self-responsibility. If we want money, it's not going to come from anyone else but us. We have to go and get it. But with the grandkids and nieces and nephews, there's no way in hell I would let them start off with working in the companies, because they are working for different bosses than we had growing up. Grandparents are not the same as parents at all. I don't care how tough you are as a parent. When you become a grandparent, that light switches and that's it. I don't know what happens, but all discipline goes out the door. And so we wanted them to cut their teeth and work with somebody else first. And when they were working with somebody else and they got uncomfortable situations, passed up for raises, bad bosses, harassed in the workplace, coworkers that were jerks, having to conform to OSHA standards that you didn't always agree with, or policies that you didn't have the authority to correct, even though you saw how wrong and detrimental they were. These were things that they needed to go learn by seeing something else, by seeing a different environment, working with other people. Now, one day, if they want to come and work for Shilanski and Associates, will we let them? Yeah, for sure. But they have to cut their teeth and do work elsewhere first. And then that way, when they come into our fold and they see how excellent we are, it just resonates. They don't take that for granted anymore because they've seen something else. They've experienced something else. So do I think nepo babies are good? I think they're natural. I think it's a natural progression of human nature to want them. I don't think that in this country, we do a great job of giving our kids the tool sets to be successful adults. We're so afraid of being hard on them that all we're doing is making really soft people that cannot endure situations, that cannot get uncomfortable and know how to succeed. And I think that will be to their detriment, because the kids that are being taught that they must be resilient, they must endure, they must find solutions, they must do those things, those are the kids that are going to take over the world. And they're out there. They're getting raised. They're just not being raised on social media. You're just not seeing it on YouTube. They're just not influencers. But they're all around us. They're just a little bit quieter. TPR Nation, everything we do is about giving you action items. Hopefully you've already extracted them from this. And that is, number one, working with your kids, planting those seeds, bringing them into the fold, making sure that they are part of that conversation. Number two, it's okay to get uncomfortable. It's okay. As long as their safety is not at risk, it's okay for them to get uncomfortable and learn how to navigate that situation without you having to step in all the time and fix it for them. Because one day, you're not going to be here to fix every situation for them. Let them go work for somebody else. Let them work for somebody else. Let them see what life is like outside of your beehive. Let them experience that. And when they're ready to come back into the fold and return, they'll have so much more gratitude for that opportunity. And they'll see it as an opportunity and not just something that's expected of them. TPR Nation, this is Jamie Shilanski in an episode of Worlds to Conquer. Go find people who share your values and change the world.
Hey everybody, ever wish that you could get more from this podcast than just Micah and I telling jokes back and forth and making witty comments? Well, great news is that you can. For a select group of advisors, Micah and I will coach you through how to get your practice to the next level. What does that look like? It looks like regular webinars just for our members. It looks like access to templates, systems, processes, marketing materials that we're using day in and day out in our practice. It looks like the value adds that we're doing each calendar quarter. And it looks like the forum, the members only forum, where you can get spot coaching and ask questions to Micah and I directly. So go to theperfectria.com/grow/GROW to get more information from more great resources that are available to our podcast listeners.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife. The perfect RIA.